Hi everyone, this is Anil. In this video, we'll talk about how to use a Windows virtual machine with a midserver installed on it to restart midservers on Linux VM. So this is the solution design. You can see that we have a Windows VM which has a midserver running on it. So this will act as a master controller. And in the same environment, we have multiple Linux VMs installing with midservers installed on them. Now we will use this Windows VM to act as a controller to restart midservers on this Linux VMs. So this Windows VM will have a PowerShell script installed on it or set up on it that will make an SSH connection to those individual Linux VMs, and then it will trigger a shell script on this VM which will do the work of restarting the midserver. Now to run this PowerShell script, we will initiate a flow action in ServiceNow. Through a flow action, we will pass the window Linux VM name, the username that has to be used to log into the VM, and that will be done through a ECQ entry. And this Windows VM will go and pick up the ECQ entry, and then it will accordingly identify on which Linux VM the midserver has to be restarted, and accordingly it will do the work. Let's look at the setup required. So if you see here, this is the community link which I have created, which has all the instructions. So the first step is we have to install a module called POSH-SSH module. It's a PowerShell module on Windows VM. And once we do that, we will test the installation of this module by running this get help command on this command let new-SSH session. So this proves that the installation is successful. Then we'll create a shell script by name mid.sh on Linux VM uh, that will do the actual work of restarting the midserver. And once that is done, we will test it using this command called bash home slash username slash mid.sh. And then we'll create two PowerShell scripts. The first one is to create a password file which will contain the password to access this Linux VM. And then there is a PowerShell script which will actually do the work of setting up this SSH connection and then running this PowerShell script or running this shell script, which is this bash script, right? And then now finally, to wrap all this up, we will create a flow action in ServiceNow, which will call this PowerShell script restart linux mid.ps1, and it will take these three input parameters. One is the script name, and then the midserver name, and then the midserver username. So finally, we'll prove that by using ServiceNow flow action, we are able to restart a Linux VM through a Windows VM, right? And these are the scripts which are the code of the script, right? This is a password script which actually creates a password file for a given username, and then this is the actual PowerShell script which does the SSH connection, and then it runs a command, and then it prints output also. And then this is the Linux script which does the work of restarting the VM, restarting the midserver on Linux VM. And then these are the input parameters to the flow action. And this is the flow setup, which has the input variables. The flow script. Let's look at the flow script a little bit. So what this does is it creates. First, we'll go and look at this table called ECC agent capability M2M. This basically contains the capabilities of midservers. So it will pick up a midserver which has a PowerShell capability, and that is up and running. And then it will go and create an entry in ECC queue with this midserver that it has identified here, and then it will pass a command PowerShell space script name. Script name is nothing but this variable which contains a script name plus these two input parameters, which is a midserver name and the midserver username. So once that is all done, then it will basically trigger this uh, PowerShell command in the Windows VM, and that will do the work in the backend. So let's do this in action. First, we'll look at the two mid servers. This awesome mid one is a mid server running on Linux VM, and this Varan AZ2044 is a mid server running on Windows VM. So let's double click. So if you see here, this is running on Linux VM, and Uh, this is running on a Windows VM. So now from this, from the context of the solution, so this is the master controller midserver, which does the work of running the PowerShell script, and then this is the target Linux VM midserver, which we are trying to restart. So let's first build the required scripts on both Linux VM and Windows VM, and then we will also create a flow in ServiceNow. So I'm logged into my Windows VM, and I'm installing this PowerShell here. I'm installing the PowerShell module called POSH SSH. So let's first do that. Install module POSH SSH. So if it is already installed, it will give you a message saying it is already, it's POSH-SSH. So let's install that. Yeah, so now it is, I ran the command because it's already installed. I get a prompt, I mean like a prompt back. Now let's do the get help to see if the module is available. So I'm running a get help for this command let new -SSH session. So here you can see that it tells me the synopsis of this command let and so on, which proves that the installation is successful. Next we'll create the two PowerShell scripts. The first one is password gen PowerShell script. So if you see here, it basically has username and password file as the two input variables. So this is the username that I'll be using to log into the Linux VM, and then this is the file in which the password is stored. So now what this does is it basically prompts us to enter the password two times, first time and second time, to verify that we are entering the accurate password, and then it will create this file. Right, this file will be used in the next script. So let's run this and see how it works. So you see that it asks me to enter the password, and when I enter it, then it will ask me to enter it again, and then once I do that, then it will create the file. Right, I'll show you how the file looks like. Uh, so if you see here, it creates a file called zzawesomenow.pw.txt, which is nothing but username.pw.txt. Now let's look at the second PowerShell script, which is doing the work of restarting the the midserver. So you can see that it is establishing. Yeah, it takes two input parameters. The first one is the computer name of the Linux VM, and the second one is the user ID, which has to be used to log into Linux VM. And then we have hard coded this password location, right? Because this is dynamic based on the user ID. And then if you see here, it is setting up a new SSH connection, uh, and then it is running this command here, uh, and then it is doing all the work, right? So before we run this, we will first go and create this mid.sh shell script on the Linux VM. So let's do that. So I'm logged into my Linux VM, and here I'm in the home location. So here I have a file called mid.sh. Let's look at the content of it. So you can see that it runs two commands. The first one is to stop, and second one is to start. So generally, the purpose of the solution is if it is already stopped, then we want to start it. But again, we just want to be sure that it is already stopped before you uh, start it again. So that's why we're running both the stop and start commands. And this is the path where my midserver is installed. Uh, like it's till OPT, and then from OPT it's all directory structure of midserver, and then this is the actual shell script which comes out of the box from ServiceNow, where it will do the start and stop of the midserver. And then I have added a 15-second sleep time, that is only to give enough time for the midserver stop to happen, but you can always change this to a PSF validation to ensure that it actually is already stopped before you can try to start again. That's about this shell script. We can try running it and see. We have to do a bash dot slash mid dot sh. So this should stop and start. As you can see, it is stopping it. Let's wait for that to stop. So you can see that the mid server is also down in ServiceNow, and then now it should come up because on Linux I'm seeing that it is. So you can see that on Linux it has started, and then it's running a PID of 6720. So you can see that the status is now up. on the mid server, right? So this is how the script works. Let's try running this script here, right? So we just have to pass uh, the the IP address of the Linux VM and then the username. So let's do that. So I'll say PowerShell uh, slash, and then we have to give the IP address. So let's do that. So this is the IP address and this is the username. So I'll just enter it. So once we do that, it will first make an SSH connection. Then it made a connection. Now it is trying to run the command, and then it will restart the mid server. So we can check what is going on the Linux VM. So I can see that when I ran the I will run grep service now. So now the restart is complete because let me try to see what is running. So the stop command came up here, so as you can see. So now it's trying to stop it, and then after the start command will come to start the net server, right? uh, so we'll give it a minute. So as you can see on ServiceNow side, the stop command the stop command ran, and then the status is now down, right? So now we can see that there is no uh, process running, so that means the stop is complete. The start has to come anytime soon. So let's check the start. Okay, so you can see that the start also has come now. Okay, let's try to minimize this a little bit. Yeah, so the start would have executed already, so that's where that's it's not coming up, but we can see that the mid server is not running, right? So I do a grep again ServiceNow, and I see that this whole process is coming up, which means the mid server is running. And if you go to ServiceNow, you can see that the mid server is up and running now. And then if you go to PowerShell, you can see that the output is showing as the session is closed. I mean, it doesn't print all of it, but it does. I mean, all it is doing is just running the script, so which means it is stopping and starting as well. But the result only shows stop. But if you see here in the output, it is showing all of it, right? Stopping, starting, and then the PID of it. So all of them. So that is how this PowerShell script is doing the work. Now let's try to execute this from ServiceNow. So here we made a new uh, flow action. So the flow action has three inputs, as I mentioned: script name, midserver name, and midserver username. The script itself contains these three parameters, and then the variables, and then this is actual script, which basically picks up something with a PowerShell capability, and then creates entry in SQL, and then runs this command, which is what we just ran on the Windows VM. And then I'm not printing any outputs, but we can also print output which prints the result variable if needed, right? But yeah. So now we can test it. Click on test, and then we pass the three values. So once we pass this script path with the name of the script, mid-server host IP address, and the username, and run test, you should see an ECC entry getting created. I should see an ECC entry created, as you can see, right? So this is the command it is running, and it is already in processing state, which means it is already running. We can check the Linux VM to see what is going on there. So if you see here, if I check this, if I do a psf grep stop and sudo, I can see that there is a stop, so midserver.sh stop script is running, which is initiated by ServiceNow through PowerShell, right? So this is what is doing the work. So let's check and see if this completes, and then after that the start has to come up. So we can also remove this stop, and then just do a sudo and see if uh, the start comes up as well. But right now only seeing stop. So once the stop is done, the start will start. And then if I go to service now, I can see that the status is down, which means the mid server is stopped. So I can see that the mid server state is also showing as processing right here for this command. So once it is processed, you should see a entry coming up. Oh, not this one. Yeah, so there should be an entry which comes up which says which is an input entry in the queue that shows that it has processed it. Right, we'll give it like 15-20 seconds and then we will check again. So now we can see that the start is also triggered on the Linux VM, which means now it is trying to start it. And then we can check here what is the status of the mid server. uh, I'll just do a grep ServiceNow. So now I can see that the process is running. Now we can check in ServiceNow if the mid server is up. Yeah, so you can see that now the status of mid server is up and running. So which means the script has done the work. It has restarted the mid server, right? So this is how it works. The whole solution. Right? We'll do a quick recap. So again, the scope of solution is we want to use a Windows VM which has a mid server running on it as a master controller, which will have the ability to restart mid server on any of the Linux VMs. So we are trying to keep the script as dynamic, the PowerShell script, by passing two parameters. One is the username that has to be used to log into the Linux VM, and then the host name of the Linux VM. So the PowerShell script, what it does, the SSH connection to the Linux VM, and it does the work of triggering a script which is running on the Linux VM, which does the restart of the mid server. Now to trigger this PowerShell script on Windows VM, we created a flow action in ServiceNow that will create a record in ECC queue, which in turn will do which will be picked up by the Windows VM, and it will run the corresponding PowerShell script. So this is how the solution works. Thanks for watching. This is Anil.